75 wasn't on the flight roster, but her clock was ticking. Morales didn't argue when they pulled him from the line. 2 fingers taped, some excuse about light duty. They sent him to Hangar 3, where birds went to die, and recruits went to disappear. It was old, silent, half-lit. But something about that place didn't feel fully shut down. Day 1, Morales found a chalkboard near the back wall, faded green, corners cracked, still mounted. On it, a list of aircraft call signs, but the dates were wrong. The last chalk entry was 7 months ago. But someone had recently wiped the dust around the top row, not with a sleeve or rag, with fingers. 2 names were still visible. 75, pilot none, co-pilot none. He ran a hand along the chalk tray. No fresh marks, no eraser, no recent chalk pieces. Just the board, and the strange feeling that someone had come through quietly, just before him. The rest of the hangar was quiet, except for one bird. 75. She sat farther back than the others, nose angled slightly off-center. Old paint, blades covered. But there was something about her, like she hadn't fully shut down yet. That's when Morales noticed it. The fuel panel latch. It was clean. No dust. No smudges. Just one small fingerprint at the edge, left in grease. Someone had opened her up, recently, and that wasn't on any log. He checked the clipboard on the wall. No sign out. No entry. No flight scheduled. But somehow, that bird was ready. He didn't say anything the first day. But the next morning, Morales came early, before the rest of the maintenance crew clocked in. The sun hadn't cleared the mountains yet, and the hangar was still cold, the kind of cold that clings to metal long after the night has passed. He walked straight to 75, didn't even look at the clipboard, and there it was, a rag, tucked neatly under the cyclic, not one of the standard issue ones from Supply. This one was old, frayed at the corners, white with a red stitch along one edge, the kind used back when gear had to last more than a year. It smelled faintly of grease and something older, jet fuel maybe, or the ghost of it. Morales hadn't left it there. Neither had anyone from the flight deck crew. He was sure of it. He reached up, careful not to smudge anything, and pulled the rag free. Underneath, the cyclic grip was spotless, wiped, polished, used. Someone had been in that seat. Not for show, for flight. He stepped back and looked at the instrument panel. A few switches were flipped to stand by. Not enough to drain the battery. Just enough to suggest memory. That's when he noticed the clock. Analog. Set to 5:42. Exact. The second hand ticked once. Then again. Alive. But the aircraft had no listed power. No startup code. No prep crew signed off. Morales looked around the hangar. Empty. Still. But something didn't sit right. Because everything around 75 was covered in dust. Except her. And something about that rag, the red stitch, felt familiar. But not from a maintenance manual, from a mission photo. He'd seen one like it on her wrist, wrapped as a sweatband under a flight glove, in an article, about a pilot who flew SEAL teams out of black zones no one admitted existed, and who retired, without ceremony, because some exits aren't listed. On the third day, Morales stayed late. The others had gone home. Crew chief clocked out at 1900 sharp. No questions, no reason to stay. But Morales couldn't leave. Not with 75 sitting too clean. Not with the rag still folded in his locker. Not with that clock ticking inside the panel when no power had been signed off. So he waited. Just inside the main doors, half shrouded by a rusted tool crate. At 1934 he heard it. Not footsteps. Not a vehicle. Just a small sound. The creak of old boots across concrete, padded by experience. The kind of step that forgets how to echo. He didn't move. Didn't breathe loud. The sound circled left, toward the fuel side of the aircraft, then stopped behind the exhaust stack. A moment later someone emerged. Civilian jacket. Olive drab. Hood pulled. Beard tight. Hair gray around the edges. No rank. No badge. The man moved like he knew every bolt on that airframe. He didn't glance toward Morales. Just walked up to the nose of 75, placed a gloved hand on the panel, and stood still for a long time. Then, with practiced calm, he reached under the fuselage, opened the access bay, and pulled out the pre-flight wrench. The same one Morales had left sideways 2 hours earlier. Now it sat upright in the cradle, exactly the way it was supposed to be. The man wiped it down with a cloth. Not the red-stitched rag, a different one. Then snapped the hatch closed. Morales stepped out from behind the crate, slow. Sir? The man didn't startle. He didn't speak either. He just turned his head, not all the way, just enough, and looked at Morales. His eyes were pale. Not soft, not hard, just quiet, like he'd seen things that weren't made for speech. I didn't log any flights, Morales said. The man didn't answer. Didn't nod. Didn't deny. He simply turned, walked once around 7-5, and disappeared back into the shadows behind the exhaust stack. Gone. No sound. No door. Just absence. But the wrench had been cleaned. And when Morales looked at the cockpit again, the seatbelt was buckled. He searched the logs the next morning. Morales pulled every entry from the last 6 months, flight schedules, maintenance rotations, even fuel checklists for Hangar 9B. 7-5 wasn't listed. Not once. She didn't officially exist anymore. Struck from rotation. Scrubbed from the flight sheets. Her call sign had been reassigned years ago, to a drone unit in the Pacific. But Morales had stood in her shadow, seen her panel lights glow, felt her engine warmth linger on the skin of her nose. She was flying. And someone was logging nothing. He went deeper, pulled archived training records, old crew manifests, airframe history. Found a fragment in a training brief from 2011. 7-5, grounded post-March extraction. All flight crew presumed rotated out. No further documentation. No date of final flight. No names. No after action. Just March extraction. He didn't know what that meant until he searched deeper. There'd been a mission, buried in the declassified gray zone, in eastern Afghanistan. High elevation. Low visibility. No friendly air corridor. 4 SEALs stranded after a bad drop. 1 injured. 1 without comms. 1 dragging the other. No air support confirmed. Except a note scrawled in pen at the bottom of a scanned mission log. Bird came in from the ridge. No lights. No tail number. Extraction complete. S.T.3 lead. Name withheld. Morales sat back in his chair. Because there it was. No flight. No credit. No log. Just memory. And outside, in Bay 7B, 7-5 sat spotless. Still warm under the desert sun. And still not speaking. He didn't plan to climb in. Morales told himself he was just inspecting the cockpit. Just checking for loose connections. Just doing what the clipboard said. But the hangar was quiet again. Too quiet. And 7-5 looked different that morning. Like she was waiting. He pulled the ladder into place. The cockpit canopy was already unlatched. Inside, nothing was out of order. Everything where it should be. Except for one thing. The co-pilot's seat. It was warm. Not sun-warmed. Not with the hangar still dark and cold, but recently occupied warm. Like someone had been sitting there less than 10 minutes ago. And on the seat, a single object. A folded flight map, hand-marked in pencil. Faded lines crossing terrain that didn't exist anymore. Red ink around a ridge Morales recognized from the old debrief. The same place the SEALs had been pinned down. He opened the map fully. 1 set of coordinates circled. No date. No unit code. Just 5 words scribbled in the corner, tight and square. No one's coming but me. He stared at it for a long time. Then glanced up, and saw the old man again. Outside the hangar now, across the concrete strip. Standing just behind the windbreak wall, profile to the sunrise. Same jacket. Same stillness. No reaction. But for the first time, Morales felt something pass between them. Not permission, not command. A handoff. And when he turned back toward the cockpit, the flight systems had gone dark. Battery disconnected. Map gone. Seat cold. As if the man had never been there. But Morales knew better. Because he could still feel the warmth in his own hands. And something told him, that wasn't the first time the old man flew alone. It showed up on a Monday, taped to the inside of Morales's locker, between the mirror and a folded pair of spare socks. No note. No envelope. Just a patch. Old canvas, edges frayed. Velcro back worn smooth from years of press and pull. No unit logo. No rank. Just one thing stitched in dark thread. A rotor blade crossed with a trident. Not official. Not from supply. It was the kind of thing passed hand to hand, quietly, without explanation. Morales picked it up carefully, turned it over. Nothing on the back, but he felt it. Same weight as the watch Gibbs had left behind. Same silence. Same clarity. He brought it to the hangar after hours. sat alone on the rear step of 7-5, feet resting on the skid. The wind moved slow and dry across the concrete. The map was gone. The rag had disappeared. Even the wrench he'd left as a marker hadn't been moved again. Whoever the old man was, he wasn't coming back. But someone had placed that patch. Someone had handed it off, and it meant something. Morales reached into his pocket, pulled out the folded sheet of coordinates he'd copied from the flight map before it vanished. He didn't know what to do with it yet, but he knew it wasn't for decoration. The map had carried weight. So did the patch. And if the man had left those behind, it wasn't just memory. It was instruction. Not in words. Not in orders. In presence. A lesson passed down not by command, but by the way someone buckles the harness before they speak, by the way they wipe down the panel before they leave, by the way they fly out of the dark, knowing no one will ever say they did. It started with a knock on the duty room door. They needed someone to assist with night training, a low-priority insertion sim, no gunfire, just route validation and recovery procedures. The actual crew was short. Instructor in sickbay. Everyone else overbooked. Morales wasn't rated for flight. He wasn't cleared for co-pilot work either. But someone had pulled his name. Observational, they told him. Shadow the flight chief, nothing more. He said yes before they finished the sentence. The hangar lights were off when he got there. But 7-5's rear bay was open. Ground lights glowed low orange across the deck, just enough to see the checklist strapped to the dash. No crew chief in sight. No pilot in the seat. Yet every switch had been toggled to standby. Fuel primed. Comm line open. The hum of power pulsed faint behind the cockpit glass. Morales walked up slowly. He placed his hand on the skid. Warm. Not overheating. Just used. He stepped into the cabin. No dust. No delay. No hesitation in the start sequence. Like someone had just stepped out and left the door open. On the co-pilot seat sat a flight helmet. Standard issue. But inside the band, stitched in dull thread, were 2 letters, SG, and below them, Fly Quiet. He didn't know what those initials meant, but he buckled the chin strap anyway. When he looked up, 7-5's canopy reflected a figure outside, by the windbreak wall. Still, watching, then gone. The radio crackled once. No voice. Just a pulse. The ground controller's tone came through. 7-5, green for run-up. Morales hesitated, then responded with one word. Copy. He hadn't logged in, hadn't signed out. And when the bird lifted, there was no record, just flight. They never asked where he went that night. The log showed nothing. No calls, no reports of deviation, just a blank space where flight records should have been. Morales said nothing, didn't brag, didn't hint. Just returned the helmet to its rack and placed the patch, rotor and trident, on the inside lid of his locker. He didn't sew it, didn't display it. He just kept it close. Something changed after that. Not on paper, but in the way the instructor spoke to him. In the way ground crew paused just slightly when he entered the hangar. In the way the old SEALs nodded when they passed him in the hall. As if they knew. Not the details, just enough. Every morning, Morales walked past 7-5 before the rest of the compound stirred. Not to check, not to inspect, just to see. And some mornings, the tiniest signs were still there. A wiped panel. A cockpit seatbelt buckled just so. A faint outline in the dust. Boot soles turned outward, facing the sunrise. And every time he saw them, Morales smiled. Not wide, not soft. Just enough to feel it behind the eyes. Because that bird was still warm. Still quiet. Still ready? The kind of airframe that didn't need permission to fly. The kind of legacy that didn't need to be spoken. Somewhere, in the systems no one checks, there's a mission that never got logged. An extraction that never made the news. A save no one could prove, but that somebody never forgot. And on certain mornings, if you walk the line before the sun breaks, you'll hear it. The low hum. The echo of blades. The sound of a rotor that still spins, long after the flight is over.